Hello everybody and happy bank holiday if you're in the UK. Well, this video is a bonus bank holiday book haul. You know, I have a problem. It's not news on this channel that I can't help it. I can't help it. If I see books that are secondhand particularly, I have a bit of a problem. I'll pick them up. So I have another pile of books to share with you as a bit of a bank holiday bonus, and these are books that I'm hoping to tackle, or some of them at least, in the next couple of months. So the first book I've picked up is The Whalebone Theatre by Joanna Quinn. So this is a book I don't know a huge amount. I'd already actually got it on my e-reader, but I got talked around in a bookshop to purchase it, and so yeah, I ended up in the basket. So the information on the back says this is a story of an old English manor house by the sea. Yeah, that already sounds great to me. With crumbling chimneys, draping ivory, and a library full of dusty hardbacks. It's the story of three children who grew up there and the adventures they create for themselves while the grown-ups entertain Ennis party guests. The worlds they imagine from books they aren't supposed to read, and the lessons they learn from eavesdropping through oak-panelled doors. That sounds right up my street already. This is the story of a whale that washes up on a beach whose bones are claimed by a 12-year-old girl with big ambitions and an even bigger imagination. An unwanted orphan who grows into an unmarriageable young woman, chafing under the confines of a traditional upbringing and fiercely determined to do things differently. But far away from the big house, as the children grow to adulthood, another story's been unfolding in the wings, and when the war finally takes centre stage, the siblings find themselves cast, unrehearsed, into roles they never expected to play. That sounds even better than I thought it was going to, actually better than I remember. I'd be really interested to know if anybody's read this one. It was quite big when it came out in hardback as well, so I'd love to know what your thoughts are. The next book I picked up was Mr. Magic by Kirsten White. I read her book Hide last year. I had mixed feelings about it, but I couldn't resist when I saw this one. It just sounded like a really interesting premise. I do like a bit of horror on occasion. The blurb says, "Who is Mr. Magic? Former child stars reunite to uncover the tragedy that ended their show and discover the secret of its enigmatic host. In this dark supernatural thriller from the #1 New York Times best-selling author of Hide." Now, I can't remember, I read two books around the same time. One was in like a haunted attraction, and the other one was in a theme park, a deserted theme park, and I can't remember which of the two books Hyde is, so I'll have to sort of refresh myself. It says 30 years after a tragic accident shut down production of the classic children's programme, the 5 surviving cast members have done their best to move on. But just as generations of cultishly devoted fans still cling to the lessons they learned from the show, the cast, known as the Circle of Friends, have spent their lives searching for the happiness they felt when they were on it. The friendship, the feeling of belonging, and the protection of Mr. Magic. But with no surviving video of the show, no evidence of who directed or produced it, and no records of who or what the beloved host actually was, memories are all the Circle of Friends have. Then a twist of fate brings the castmates back together at the remote desert filming compound that feels like it's been waiting for them all this time. And even though they haven't seen each other for years, they somehow understand each one better than anyone has since. So it sounds like a bit of a mystery, a bit of an odd one. Don't know much about it, but thought the premise was intriguing. Not sure, as I say, whether I picked it up off the back of the book that I thought it was following or not, but it sounds good. Quite a beautiful cover, nice colour. So I picked it up. The next one is a second-hand book that I picked up on. I love Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. It's one of those books I've read a few times. It's probably not aged as well. I've not read it for a while. But I came across this, which I couldn't believe, The Night of the Triffids, which is like a sequel, and it's written by Simon Clarke. So this has been around, I think, for a few years, since it says it was British Fantasy Award winner for Best Novel 2002, but I'd never heard about it before. The original text, Day of the Triffids, is quite a small, thin little tome, if you've ever read that. We had to read it at school, strangely enough. So this is a bit of a chunky fella, but I am really, really looking forward to reading this because I loved Day of the Triffids when I read it previously. So looking forward to reading that. The next book I got is related to the research I'm undertaking at the moment, and it's Pies and Prejudice in Search of the North by Stuart Maconie, who's a radio presenter. I got this because I'm looking at the ways that the Northwest West is portrayed in media, but also in literature, and how certain stereotypes are potentially, you know, continue. So that's why I've bought that. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I think it says a northerner in exile, Stuart Maconie goes on a journey in search of the North, attempting to discover where the cliches end and the truth begins. So that's sort of kind of what I'm looking at through my poetry. He travels to Wigan Pier, to Blackpool Tower, Newcastle's big market in the Lake District to find his own northern soul, encountering along the way an exotic cast of chippy scousers, pie-eating woolly-backs, topless Geordies, mad-foot Manx, Yorkshire nationalists and brothers in southern exile. So that's going to be quite interesting to read, and I think quite helpful in the areas that I'm looking at as well. The next book I read is a memoir. I don't know if anybody ever remembers, there was a book by Ruth Picardy, who passed away in the late 90s from cancer, and she recorded her experiences in a column in a newspaper, and then after she passed they were put all together into a memoir, which was a really fabulous memoir. I think it was called Before I Say Goodbye, and I read it years and years and years ago. But the other day I discovered that her sister then wrote a memoir. Her name's Justine Picardy, and I think it's thinking about spirituality and links with people you've lost. But it says on the back, when I think about her now, which is most of the time, it's like rewinding a silent film in my head. I see the crucial scenes in our lives together, but what I can't hear is her voice in my head, and that silence is driving me crazy. So she's looking for the voice of her sister. So she, over the course of a year, she goes into the underworld of spiritualism for a series of encounters with mediums and psychics who believe they can communicate with the lost. And it's called If the Spirit Moves You, as I say, and that's her story and her experiences with the afterlife in an age of reason, skepticism and science. It says, profoundly moving, both heartbreaking and funny. It's an extraordinary book about the exhausting journey of grief and the enduring power of love. So that is the book, If the Spirit Moves You, by Justine Picardy. The next book was kind of influenced by my reading of Termush by Sven Holm, which I mentioned in my first reads of August. And I think it was Jen Campbell who said it reminded her of High Rise by J.G. Ballard. I really like J.G. Ballard. I've read a few of his books. I particularly love Empire of the Sun, which is his sort of partly memoir about his experiences during the war. But this is one of his sci-fi sections. I don't normally get the film related covers, but I thought, why not with this one? It says, later as he sat on his balcony eating the dog, brilliant, brilliant. Dr. Robert Lang reflected on the unusual events that had taken place within this huge apartment building during the previous 3 months. Within the walls of a high-tech 40-storey high-rise, the residents are hell-bent on an orgy of sex and destruction, answering to primal urges that their utopian surroundings can't satisfy. The high-rise is a would-be paradise turned dystopia, ruled by intimidation and violence, and as the residents organise themselves for war, floor against floor, no one wants it to stop. So I think this is a sort of dystopian apocalyptic type novel, so maybe along the same lines of Termush, but I don't know as much about it. But I do really like J.G. Ballard. I read The Drowned World. I really enjoyed that. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to give that one a go. So that's another little second-hand book. Then another second-hand book from a charity shop, one that I kind of looked at a few times but I've never picked up, which is The Leviathan by Rosie Andrews. Again, this one's been around a while, so if you've read that, I'd love to know what your thoughts are, whether you enjoyed it or not. So the blurb says on the back, she is awake. Norfolk 1643 was civil war tearing England apart. Reluctant soldier Thomas Treadwater is summoned home by his sister, who accuses a new servant of improper conduct with their widowed father. By the time Thomas returns home, his father is insensible, felled by a stroke, and the servant is in prison, facing charges of witchcraft. Thomas prides himself on being an irrational modern man, but as he unravels the mystery of what has happened, he uncovers not a tale of superstition, but something dark and ancient linked to a shipwreck years before. Sounds great, gothic. It's a historical novel. There's lots there that interest me. I really like the cover as well, actually. Again, it's been out a while. I'd love to know if anybody's already read this one and what your thoughts are about it. Love a bit of a gothic novel. I think that's one that's going to be a good autumn read. Next, we have The Hierarchies by Ros Anderson. Really like the cover of that. I'm in a really pink mood at the moment, and that really sort of called to me. And turns out it's a second-hand copy, but it turns out it's signed, which is always a massively lovely little bonus as well. Really nice. So the blurb says, I'm a humanoid pleasure doll, an intelligent embodied but please call me Sylvie. In a society divided between those who are born and those who are created, fully sentient robots exist to cater to humans' every whim. Sylvie is designed to her husband's specifications and excels at pleasing him until she returns from hospital with her memory missing. From the top floor of her luxurious home, as Sylvie watches a family that is not her own, she begins to imagine a life beyond the locked gates. Could she find freedom with other dolls just like her? Does she dare to disobey the hierarchies of her programming, and what might it mean to live and love like a human? I'm getting vibes of Clara and the Sun there, by I can't remember the name of the author. It's on the tip of my tongue. I'm sure you know. I'm sure you know. It's one of those really well known books, but that's what I'm getting vibes for there. So I'm looking forward to reading it. So the next book I picked was Mrs. March by Virginia Fato. I don't know a whole lot about this, but it sounded like a really interesting premise, and I really like the sort of 50s feel cover on this one as well. It says Mrs. March lives an exquisitely controlled existence. The wealthy wife of a novelist, her life is one of routine and decorum. But one morning on a visit to her favourite patisserie, Mrs. March suffers a horrifying indignity. The shopkeeper remarks that the detestable protagonist of George March's latest novel must surely be based on Mrs. March herself. The humiliation is too much. She has been robbed not only of her beloved patisserie, which she will never visit again, love the character already, but of the belief in everything she thought she knew about her husband and herself. Thus begins an increasingly paranoid journey, one that may well uncover both a killer and some long buried secrets from Mrs. March's past. So that sounds kind of creepy and really interesting. Sort of a dark urban vibe going on there. So looking forward to reading that one. So don't know much more about that than the blurb. And last of all, I've got Elizabeth Baines' Astral Travel, which again isn't one I know a lot about. Picked this up again secondhand. Some good secondhand bargains. It says, after Patrick Jackson's death, his estranged daughter Jo tries to unravel the mysteries that always surrounded him. Why did he never talk about his past in Ireland? Why was he so moody and bad-tempered in the home while a talkative charmer in the outside world? And why did he seem to have it in for her especially, affecting her life into adulthood? Why, too, do Jo's memories of her own childhood differ starkly from her mother's? The more Jo questions and digs, the more the mysteries deepen, until at last she uncovers a chain of secrets forged in the religious and sexual prejudices of the past, but with the power to affect the lives of Patrick's family in the present day. So another kind of family, urban exploration of relationships in a family. So yeah, that sounds interesting. But yeah, those are my that's my bank holiday book haul bonus. To buying too many books. But I hope there's something on there that interests you. I'd love to know if you've read any of those books, whether you have any recommendations based on them, and if you're new to the challenge, do please feel free to like and subscribe and come along for the journey. I talk about book hauls, but I also talk about recommendations. I set myself a challenge to read 100 books in 2023. I've already completed that. Now I'm working towards 120. So who knows what it will be by the end of the year. But thank you very much for watching anyway, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.